So this is bonus time, right? We're in the bonus. That's how this works? No, my timer's going. I guess we're supposed to get started. Okay. All right, fine. My name is Jeff Fritz, and I'm here today. I want to talk to you about publishing your applications with Aspire and modern CI systems. How do we get our applications past the development environment, outside of our developer tools and into a nice cloud environment? And maybe it's a nice blue cloud, certain shade of blue. I don't know, we'll think about that. So I want to show you a couple of websites. I want to show you how the process works and give you some examples of how you want to customize and grow your deployment process. So I'm a program manager. I work on the .NET and Visual Studio teams. I help out with the Aspire folks writing some of their content, generating blog posts, announcement videos, that kind of thing. So if you haven't seen .NET Aspire, you need to know that Aspire is our cloud-ready stack for building observable, production-ready, distributed applications. And that's a lot of words that basically means we're going to do all the things in the stack in an opinionated way that you don't want to do. Because I know you don't want to write log statements. You don't want to write statements that are recording metrics. You don't want to write HTTP client retry statements. All of those things that I know you don't want to do because I've seen some of your websites, and when you go to them, we're waiting for HTTP client retries. There's log statements that are missing that would be very helpful. So we have these 6 tenets that we've brought to .NET Aspire that help to do some of those things for you out of the box and make it easier for you to do the right thing as you build and deploy your application. We want those smart defaults like logging with OpenTelemetry so that your log information is portable and you can ship it anywhere you'd like because it's using standard logging technologies. We can put it in Prometheus, we can put it in Azure Log Analytics, we can put it in Datadog, take your pick, it's very portable. And we can do retries and put resiliency into your application when you go to make connections to other services. We're going to set up orchestration for you because we know you're not just building a website. You're building a website that connects to a database. And how those two connect to each other and managing that interaction can be a pain in the neck, especially when it comes time to get your buddy Chris over there on the other side of the office to get them started working with your project. We're going to put together some integrations with some of the popular services that you're already using and make it easier to work with them by default using containers. We're going to give you a great developer dashboard that gives you insight into how all of these things are working together. Service discovery so that you don't have to remember the little HTTP ports and host names that all your services are running on. We're going to map and bring them all together for you extremely cleanly and easily. It's kind of like magic. No passwords that you need to remember or API keys when you're in your development environment. And the last one, the one that we're going to focus on a bit, we're going to make deployment better for you. So with these things in mind, I set out and was working on a number of websites. I do some live coding, live streaming on Twitch and YouTube. I show and demonstrate some of these things, some of these technologies working together. And I continued to get the same type of questions again and again. How do I do this? Wouldn't it be cool if I could do that? And the answer inevitably was Copilot that. Just drop a question into Copilot. Ask it what it is. And Copilot that kept coming out of my mouth, telling people at conferences and online, just go Copilot that. And then my Philadelphia accent snuck in. And in Philadelphia, we have a catch-all pronoun called Jawn. J-A-W-N. And it's the catch-all for anything, right? Everything is a Jawn. That table's a Jawn. These displays are a Jawn. My phone here is a Jawn. Everything's a Jawn. J-A-W-N. So let's bring that together and build a little tip website called Copilot That Jawn and lean into my Philadelphia accent. So I built a publishing stack live online that does this. That makes tips available and shows them online, but I can use Aspire to make that really easy for me to do. because I set up low-cost content delivery. I don't want to spend a lot of money to build and deliver websites. So let's set things up so that we can minimize our expenses on Azure and take advantage of as much of the free tier as possible. I set up so I could have seamless version control. I want to use GitHub to record markdown files because I'm a developer. Record markdown files, turn them into web pages, and publish. Send it out to Azure. I don't want to think about databases and other moving parts because when there's no moving parts, everything is simpler. I don't have to worry about having security nailed down and tuned for all of those things because that's what you have in WordPress, right? WordPress, you've got those setup requirements. You have to get PHP running. You got to maintain the version of PHP. Your MySQL database, you have to maintain versions of that. And as your site grows, you've got to grow your servers, grow your database. You're going to have ongoing technical maintenance for those things. So as this wide range of configurations that are available in WordPress, and it's amazing all that's available there, I don't want to have to manage that. And WordPress is a big target for hackers. So there are vulnerabilities that spring up every now and again, and it ends up breaking the internet, right? So publishing made simple, I set this up so that we can commit Markdown, submit a PR into my main branch, merge that, build and deploy out my website, and then refresh all the caches so that folks can see what's going on. That's what I wanted to build. So this makes it really easy for me to write content, put it into GitHub, get it versioned, and deploy. My pipeline to deploy is very easy. It's using standard CI/CD, which we all know how to do. When I wire it up with Aspire, it makes it even easier. And no manual intervention needed. I'm just writing code and putting it into GitHub. Everybody knows how to do that, and I can even use code spaces if I have a smaller machine or I just want to type up an article on my phone, commit, merge that, and I'm off and running. So let me show you the website, copilot.john, and then we'll take a look at exactly how it works, and then start diving into some of the let's configure and deploy this thing. So let me what did I do? Hey, there it is. All right. So the website, hey, thanks, Bing. The website is sitting out there at copilot.john.com, and it's this very simple website. It doesn't have a lot of moving pieces, but it's got a lot of articles and content out here about all kinds of things that you can use Copilot for. All right? Now, there's an About link down at the bottom that'll jump you right into information about what it is and a link to the source on GitHub. I encourage you, if there's things that you see here as we're going through and talking about how the website works, how the CI works, all of this source code is free, it's publicly accessible. Copy it down, use it in any way that you would like. It's the intention of why I built this website. So that's out there. I have a copy of it running locally. So let me grab that and we'll take a look at this running locally with Aspire. So let me drop into that folder. Yep, I'll open Visual Studio Code. And we will take a look at Bicep in just a little bit. So in Aspire, we have this concept of an app host. And in this application, hey, thanks so much. In this application, I have a Redis cache that's defined here on these lines. I also set up Redis Insight so I can inspect and take a look at what's going on inside my Redis cache. I'm using a Azure storage emulator running locally that runs inside of a container. And then I have my little website that runs here, and I add a command to it that lets me refresh my cache. Now, did I start Docker here first? I did not. So I will start Docker in the background, and we will get this running with the Aspire run command. So I want you to see the dashboard, see these pieces working together, because some of the things that I do here, while this is a simple example, they're going to apply to some of your scenarios that you already are working through in your projects. So here's the dashboard, and you see the few resources that I have. My Azure storage, that's running inside of a container. I have Redis running inside of a container. There's Redis Insight and my web project. And when I open the web project, I get what looks like the exact same thing that I had out in production. This is what we want, right? Aspire gives us the ability to have a complete end-to-end experience that emulates my production space right here on my workstation. So now I can take a look into this, and I can start to inspect and work with some of the content that's out there. So let me refresh the cache here and refresh the website. Now, you saw it barely blink there, but I can take a look in Redis, and I'm able to see exactly what's going on for my website. Come on, where's that? There we go. All right. So I can see all the content that I'm output caching and working with here. I can even see some data that I put into distributed cache here inside of Redis. Now, that information comes back to me in my traces. And if you haven't seen Aspire before, this is something that we get with no additional coding, right? Our service defaults give us the ability to take a look at the open telemetry that's being logged and stitching together these various resources. So I can see here, when I called refresh, that it made a query into Azure storage, and it took 30 milliseconds, went through and iterated on some of that data, and you can see it finished in less than a quarter of a second. Fantastic. I've got that insight as to what's going on. And I have metrics that are happening over here that show me exactly how the website is performing. And as a developer, to have that ability to have insight into what the production space is doing right here in my development environment and emulate that experience, monitor and get that data in front of me is fantastic, right? This is the works on my machine problem, giving you all the gauges and metrics right here on your machine. So all of the observability is built in there, and we're able to go through and look at what's happening. Now, I mentioned some of the things that are running for this website. When I write content, there's a folder over here called content. And I write little markdown documents like this that get read, parsed, and loaded up into Azure storage, and eventually they appear on the website. So I've got a little bit of a build process that happens that takes this content and puts it together and sends it up into GitHub and then eventually deployed to Azure. Let me also show you a little bit of information about how we can grow our websites with Aspire. I have another demo that I'm going to be showing and working folks through tomorrow with our demo, or with our workshop, our Aspire workshop. So let me open that folder. That is .NET Aspire Workshop. No, I'm going to open this with Visual Studio. That's the complete one. There we go. So Visual Studio 2026, you've heard some folks talk about the new Visual Studio. Really great stuff that is built and delivered to make you more productive. So this is a demo where I'm showing another simple instance where I have an API, you might have a microservice out there, and a website that connects into that. And these are two individual web applications that connect to each other to deliver a website. When I start in a typical non-Aspire model, I get actually two browsers running. I get one with the API, and I get the other one with the website that connects into the API. And I've also got a couple of terminals running around here that show exactly what's being done, right, on both of those instances, right? This is why Aspire is so helpful, is all of the logging that we have here gets into that one dashboard that we can work with and see distributed traces, and see different ways that we can filter these logs with structured logging. Really cool stuff. We're going to see that we're able to take simple websites like this, level them up, and add more experiences to them in the workshop tomorrow. So even that simple little website, when I level it up and I start to add, where is it? Open recent. There we go. And I start to build out that app host, I get a lot more happening under the covers here. So here's one where I've got Redis. We love Redis for caching. I've got external services. I've got an API, a database, some random Docker container. I put IT tools in here because that's a common one that's kind of fun to show off. I've got AI with a GitHub model. I've got my website, and I've even got a health checks UI down here. So scaling out and getting into more complex scenarios, we can have an app that runs like this that we're still able to build and deploy easily with GitHub, GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps if you want to use Azure DevOps and those pipelines. And Aspire will manage and launch all the things here for us, and we'll see all these turn green. And eventually I'm able to launch, get into my website. And this bounces off the American National Weather Service. So I can search for weather reports in different locations. Like my hometown, Philadelphia. I can click into that and it will show me the weather forecast down here with a little AI help. It comes back and says, in general, it's going to be sunny coming up. Fantastic. It's all managed with Aspire, and this is all really easy to package up and move into GitHub and eventually Azure or some other location if you want to publish to other clouds or Kubernetes. Tools are available to help you with that. I'm going to focus on Azure and GitHub today. So I have these two apps. When I want to start to scaffold them, I'm going to use a tool called AZD. So you can use, there's of course the publish button that's sitting inside Visual Studio. You can use that and it'll do the same things here. There are 3 steps to using this AZD command line. And this will work on all systems, Windows, Mac, and Linux, okay? You install AZD, it's available on it's available on the Linux, oh my gosh, some of the Linux package repositories. It's available from Winget also. So 3 commands that you need to know: AZD init, AZD pipeline config, and then AZD up. AZD init sets up your repository, your folder running locally so that it knows that we're going to configure and deploy things out to Azure. We're going to step through and you'll see what it prompts you for each one of these. AZD pipeline config is going to start to write a GitHub action for you that's appropriate for your application so that it actually publishes out to an Azure Container Apps service. And then AZD up is actually going to execute that process and deploy out to Azure. So let's go through and do this with just a plain Aspire starter app and see how it works. And I'm not actually going to deploy because it takes a few minutes to deploy, and I've got some more content I want to show you along the way here. So let's do some live coding and walk through that real quick. So I'll stop and shut down some of these things. We're going to work in a new VS Code instance. Actually, I'm not even going to use VS Code. So let me jump up and let's do, let's call this, Azure Dev Summit app, right? That looks good. And in here, I will do Aspire new. I'll use the Aspire command line to generate just a starter template. The content of this isn't entirely important for what I want to show. No test project. We're going to use Redis cache. It's going to use the latest Aspire templates, and we're going to see that it generates a very simple app here for me in this folder. There we go. I'll open it in VS Code. And just to show you what's going on under the covers here, here's the app host for this app. go. Garden variety stuff to just get things started. I've got my Redis cache. I've got a API service that does a fake weather report. And then I've got a web front end. We're going to set it up to make sure that the cache and the API service are available before the website starts. If you've been to some of the other Aspire sessions, you've probably seen this kind of thing already. But let's do the deployment for this. So once again, back here at the terminal, I will do azd init, and it's going to give me some options, choose a template. It's easiest in my mind to just scan the current directory. It'll go and discover that this is an app host, this is an Aspire service, and it will start processing and giving you some options here. Now, as we're working through, Aspire is very much a growing set of services and features. As we're going through, there are new features that are coming online that are not entirely ready for prime time, that they're experimental, that are called publishers, that'll allow you to specify in your app host file exactly how you want things published. This, by default, will get you set up using the command line like this, will get you set up with an Azure Container Apps service and things registered inside of a resource group for you. So I'm just going to let that go for right now, and I'll call this ADS first app. All right, so it's done. It's generated some YAML and some Markdown. The next thing that we can do is we can just run AZD up right now and deploy the application. And it will prompt me for my Azure credentials and go and set up those things. But I don't want to be the person sitting here that every time we need to deploy, I have to run AZD up from my desktop. Because I know at some point, all of you had some person who was sitting in a corner of the office and it was their job to click publish. Am I right? That was some job at some point that somebody had. And that's annoying. We want to do this with continuous integration, continuous deployment. So the next command that I mentioned was azd pipeline config. And this gives you the opportunity to configure your continuous integration and deployment pipeline. You can choose GitHub or Azure DevOps. I like GitHub, so I'm going to choose GitHub. It's going to take a look at the application and now initializing the bicep provider, right? Bicep is that meta language that allows us to define how things are going to be deployed out to Azure. Choose an Azure subscription. I don't know, that one looks good. I've got too many Azure subscriptions. I work here, you know? So it's going to initialize the bicep provider and come back and prompt me, hey, where would you like to deploy? I'm on the East Coast of the States, so it suggests to me East Coast because that's where a lot of my stuff is. The default Azure Dev YAML contains a basic workflow to help you get started. Yes, add that, and now it doesn't detect a GitHub repository. It now is going to walk me through setting up a GitHub repository, doing my first commit, submitting any user secrets that we need to put onto GitHub, and saving those as secrets with the project. I'm going to stop at this point and bail out because these things that we're about to step through are not really where I want to touch on, right? You've already got GitHub repositories set up. You've already got some of those things in place. I want to show you now the action that it created and walk through exactly what we can do with that. So when we look at the default action that it builds for us, and honestly, this alone saved me so much time because when you are first doing that continuous integration script, how many times do you have 10, 15, 20 commits that are all trying this again, moving this over, changing the name of this service, putting a space in there where it should, putting a space in there where I had a tab. You have these weird little just one-off tests inside of your commits in the repository because you're tinkering with this thing. It's already mostly built for you, and that's fantastic. Look at what it gives you by default here. It's going to detect whenever there's a push to your main branch, your primary branch, your master branch, we used to call that, right? Or workflow dispatch. We're going to give you a button on GitHub that you can click and run this manually. It's going to set up some permissions to Azure. We want to make sure that we have write access with the ID token and we want to be able to read the contents that are out there. Set up all my Azure credentials, my client ID, my tenant ID, subscription ID. I don't have to remember this. This is all stuff that AZD was going to walk through, have me log into Azure, and capture these things and put it into GitHub for me. I don't have to configure that. And then the typical things that we do as developers when we're integrating our applications, right? Check out my code, install AZD, but set up .NET, make sure I have the right .NET version for me, 8 and 9. You may want to add 10. When 10 comes out, the template will be updated there so that 10 is available as well. But then the pieces that I'm not familiar with. I'm a developer. I don't spend time configuring Azure that much. So these pieces, log in with Azure federated credentials, I'm all thumbs when it comes to those things, right? I'm used to slinging angle brackets and C#. This is something that I'm not familiar with, and I'm okay with that. Let somebody who's an expert in managing the security handle that, and it generated it for me, and it's going to run that in PowerShell. And then finally, here's where the real action is. Provision the infrastructure, so actually allocate containers, container registries, log analytics workspaces, set up managed identities so that we know that we have secure users that are running our services and allowed to access only the things that are running in my resource group. And then finally, deploy the application. Actually build and push this thing into a container, load it into the registry, and let folks on the container apps spin it up gracefully and start using those services that we've deployed. Now, that's the default that it gives you. And of course, I'm sure like many of you, I look at that and I think, I can do better, right? Because there's other considerations that I want to put in there. Like, there's some folders that I don't want to trigger the build. Like when I update README documentation on the front of my repository or other documentation for other developers, I don't want to trigger a new build, so I need to update my build file. Do you have unit tests? You're going to want to drop a test statement in there. Maybe you have end-to-end tests like Playwright. You're going to want to add those capabilities. Custom Azure configuration. There's ways that we can generate the bicep that's going to be used to deploy to Azure so that you can customize and put things in there like custom domain names, setting up custom scaling rules, session affinity, custom egress capabilities. You want to add those in, you're going to need to modify and update the way that action file runs. Maybe you want to add some reports into it also, so that when the tests finish running, you get a little report that pops out on that pull request or on that action that says, hey, here's how things performed. Here's what was successful. Here's what wasn't. And the last one that I get into is managing container image growth. So we'll come back and talk about that one in a little bit. But I've customized my instance of this. And I will show you what it does for Copilot.John. I'll go back to that demo. So the source code for this GitHub action, like I said, it's free. You can take a look at it. But I've extended it so that it does some of those other things. So paths ignore. I don't want to rebuild when my content changes, or one of my GitHub instructions or workflows changes, documentation changes. Don't go and rebuild and redeploy the site. The site didn't change. It's just other things that I'm working on. Some of these are identical to what they were before. I removed the .NET version 8 because I don't use 8, I use 9. But there, run unit tests. Log in with Azure, provision the infrastructure, deploy the application, and then I have extensive caching on the website. So I want to run a thing that's going to go flush cache. So I wrote a little script that uses curl to go out to the website, pass in a refresh API key. See, it's hidden behind a secret so that you don't see it and I dox myself again. And we're going to go and make sure that we're able to cache and flush the cache so that folks start getting the new content when they visit the website. Now, when that builds and deploys, let's actually go out to the Azure portal and take a look at how this sits out there and some of the things that it delivers. And then I want to tell you about this little gotcha about the container images. So here it is starting up, and we'll jump into, I believe it's this one, if I've got it right. Yep. So here's the resource group for, I'm sorry, that's the website. Here's the resource group. There we go. So it's got this wonderful collection of names for the services here. So they've all got some sort of a prefix in front of them. But the big one that they have up front is the container registry. There's free allocations for most of these services that you're going to be using here. The only one that there isn't really a free allocation for is the container registry. I have a shared Redis cache that I use across 4 or 5 of the various websites that I run, so I don't really count that as I'm spending money on this service, because I'm already spending it over there on my blog and 2 or 3 other websites. So that's out there. Azure Storage, and there's not that much in my storage account for this. Container apps environment, think of that as effectively Kubernetes that's hosting the containers that we're deploying. It's my own isolated instance of it. And then I've got some managed identities. These are secure identities that have been granted access to only parts of the application that they need, so they're in an isolated security envelope, right? When I have the website run to deploy, there's a managed identity that runs and has access to interact and deploy and update these resources. There's another one that actually manages how the website runs. And when the website is running under that identity, it has explicit access into some of these other resources, and so on. And of course, there's the website. Now, I mentioned the container registry. There's a gotcha here. Hi. I just turned around, there's somebody standing next to me. So there's a little gotcha here, and let me show you. If we take a look at the monitoring, by default, this gives you 10 gigabytes of container storage. And if you're like me and you're building .NET apps and you're deploying them, each one of your .NET apps that you deploy is taking up a container that's maybe 100, 150 megabytes. So when you start deploying more and more copies of it, it starts eating up that 10 gigabytes of storage. So if I look at the repositories here, there's the one for my website, and you'll see I've got a handful of instances out here that have been built and are hanging around, older versions of the website. Here's the thing. When you do continuous deployment, if you have several microservices, many websites, resources that you're packaging up and deploying as containers, this thing fills up quick. When that fills up and it goes to deploy, you're going to hit your quota, and it doesn't matter how good your build was. It doesn't matter how pristine the performance is inside your application. You're out of space. You got to clean this thing up. So another GitHub action that I add to help with my continuous deployment does the cleanup of that, and you can find it here in my GitHub workflows, and it's conveniently called Cleanup Container Images. I run this every day at 2 a.m., and what you'll see here is it uses the same types of connection information, set up the Azure CLI, and goes and gets my Azure Container Registry. I wrote this so that it could be generically dropped into any other project. And then it runs a command down here where it looks at the various repositories that are available, reports those, sets up any filters that it needs, and runs ACR purge. Keep the last 5. Okay? I can't stress enough how many times I've had a website down because my container registry is full. So that's something that handy to have in there, something that we can script. You can put a job out there that runs as a cron job on a service somewhere. GitHub will run this for me free, and I don't have to think about it. To go one further, I generated this script with Copilot. So I didn't even think about it that much except for the purge filters here. So feel free to take this, use this if this is something that you would find useful as you're building, deploying, and working with your applications. So that runs and makes sure that everything's cleaned up. Additionally, I also have, and I'll show it over here, I have another job that runs every night at midnight. It wakes up and checks to see if there are new articles. If for some reason there was a failure and we need to deploy new content, I have a little app called Content Loader that I wrote that wakes up, grabs the Azure Storage connection string, and goes and uploads the content and generates a little report here. That's something that I do so that I have my application generating the content, generating and managing that content out on the website. So there's also an entry on the README that shows how many articles there are and when the last time it was updated. I just pushed an update today, and you saw the website went and updated and delivered new content. So my portal out here is all set up so that the website delivers and answers and presents content on a custom domain name. That's something that we're adding features into AppHost so that you can configure on your own. If I go into the website, right, we know we can do this inside of Azure Container Apps right here. I can set up and make sure folks are allowed to access this application from outside the container app. That's right, that checkbox there is why we have inside of AppHost that command with external HTTP endpoints. So this literally sets up that checkbox and configures egress for you in Kubernetes. Additionally, I mentioned about custom domain names. There's the one I wanted to show. So there are techniques that will start to get you configuring these inside AppHost. They're not great yet because you still have to go through a bit of the setup over here. What I do, and kind of the reliable way to do this, and I show this because it's kind of the escape hatch for customizing how you deploy content when you need to customize those resources. Specify domain names. When you run AZD at the command line, one of the other things you can do is AZD infra, is it still synth? It's infragen. And what this does is it generates all the bicep files for your application and writes them into the folder for you so that they aren't generated on the fly for your application. So if I go back to this basic example, you will see by default here inside of the root of the application, I've got a main bicep file that has all kinds of configuration specifying the resource group, some of the information about log analytics, managed identity IDs. It sets up parameters. It defines the various resources. We're going to always deploy a managed identity so that you're doing things securely by default. That container registry so that we deploy, manage, and scale your containers with content that's sitting there in a registry that you can depend on and manage yourself. Set up a role assignment for folks, log analytics workspace, there's the container app environment, and if you want the Aspire dashboard, there's the Aspire dashboard if you'd like. The actual website is configured here inside of infra, and there's web front end. Now, this is the part I want to show you inside this list of all the YAML properties that are defined in here. That ingress says, yes, we're going to allow external access to this application, and here's the target port, and notice the transport is HTTP. It doesn't have an SSL cert allocated, so we need to customize that so that it does start using SSL. So what I have inside my applications, I have the customization added for this. So external true, target port, and I forced it to 8080 because I'm tricky like that, I guess. No insecure connections, and then I define my custom domains, and there's my SSL certificates. Now, those certificates and those ID numbers, right, it doesn't matter if you know the certificate ID. That's a public key that references a secret that's sitting out on Azure. That doesn't do anything for you, so I'm not concerned about folks seeing that. Those certificates, you need to set up separately. You can't set them up during the deployment process, but you need to copy in and get this information into your bicep file so that it knows how to deploy and how to configure the domain name. Because if it's not there, the next time a deployment happens, it will drop your domain name and your SSL cert from your website. And nobody wants that, because once again, your app's offline, and that's a pain in the neck. So if I scroll through here, you'll see some of the other secrets that it defines and manages inside my applications. If you have other secrets, other parameters that you add to your application from outside of app host, maybe you've got parameters that you're adding like OAuth, client IDs and secrets, right? API keys to external services. And you define those as secrets inside of .NET Aspire. Instead of them appearing as a secret here, they'll appear as a reference to an Azure Key Vault, and it will deploy an Azure Key Vault that contains those values that you specify inside your resource group. Really handy stuff to have available to you. So that's important. This information that's here on the ingress, if you need to copy that out, and once again, this is something you only really need to do right now as we're growing the Aspire surface. There will be commands that do this for you. But here inside of, I'm inside the website, there's this JSON view, little hyperlink in the top right corner. When you click that, it will show you the JSON representation of your application and all the properties here, right? Look at all those IP addresses. I feel special. So many of them, it's great. But there you go, ingress down here. So you need to copy in that custom domains block. Take it from JSON to YAML, copy that in, and it will give you, by default, the correct domain names and certificates hooked up to your application. But you need to configure it once here before you can put it into your continuous integration process. Not hard to do, but you need to know that it's out there, okay? I did want to show, another website that I have running that uses a lot of this same technique is aspirify.net. Because if you're building an app and you're going to put it with Aspire, you're going to Aspirify it. So I bought the domain name and turned it into a news website. This is a Blazor website that is built and deployed with .NET Aspire. I can't make this source code available because the design, it's a commercial design that I paid for on a website, so I can't share it. But I can show you the code that runs this and put some of the code for the design up on screen, and I'm not breaking my license in showing that. What this website does is a couple of different things in how it runs and manages, and how it has various secrets to run the application. I will open that project. Now, for this one, this has a Redis cache, and I cheat by adding this in here, and I say publish as connection string. There's a Redis integration, an Azure cache for Redis integration that you can use that will set you up so that it deploys and sets up an Azure cache. This add Redis configuration sets up a container for you. And it'll run as a container locally, and it will also set up a container on whatever destination hosting provider you use. So maybe it's not Azure, maybe it's AWS, maybe it's GCP, maybe it's a Kubernetes cluster that's running on a set of Raspberry Pis over in the corner of the office. This will set up a Redis container for you. But by choosing publish as connection string, it prompts me for a secret for that connection string at publication time, and that's how I use one Redis cache across multiple websites. I just provide the same connection string each time that runs. I've wrapped up some of my configuration as extension methods here so that all the nonsense around setting up storage or the database is sitting in another file, and those folks that manage those resources can look at those C# classes and manage those. And when I set up my web application, I did the same thing. I've got everything sitting in another class file here, program web server, that has the extension and the information I need to interact with it. And you'll see I've added parameters here like my YouTube API key and my Iron Excel key. Iron Excel is a library that I'm using to generate Excel sheets. I'm adding a parameter from my app settings, and it's marked secret true. This puts it into a key vault. The YouTube API key, I didn't do that, and it ends up being publicly visible on the Azure portal. So when I jump back over here, I want you to see how this deploys and sits out there. So here inside of, this is the website, and we look at the containers, environment variables, and it sets up Azure Client ID, forwarded headers, HTTP ports, open telemetry configuration, and there's my YouTube API key in clear text, keyed right into my Azure portal. Well, that stinks, right? You'll see the secrets there reference a secret, right? It's pulling those out of Key Vault instead of sitting there as manual configuration that's copied into each one of my container instances as they start. Much better practice and doing the right thing by default, right? Because at some level, we as developers shouldn't be able to see the secrets that are running production and connecting those things together. So, additionally, I want to make sure you know, because it scared the snot out of me, when you look at your resource group here and you see that Key Vault, you click into Key Vault, there are roles and access to this that you might not have by default. It doesn't matter if you're the only user on a subscription and you are the owner of the subscription. By default, you don't have access to read and interact with the Key Vault. We don't give the owners of the subscription access to manage Key Vault when you deploy with Aspire. The only people who should see those secrets are the operation folks who actually have access to explicitly to the Key Vault and to those secrets across the organization. So once again, we're doing things to make it secure and prevent prying eyes that shouldn't see those keys from sneaking in and taking a look at it. Because let me tell you, it is the weirdest thing when the CTO goes and grabs the database password out of production because they want to go and tweak a record every now and again. And I've been in an organization that did that, and it made the operations folks, especially our DBAs, scream. I have never heard an argument like that before because the CTO went and decided to grab a password. Like, okay, way to go there, friend. So you don't have access to that by default. I believe those are the parts that I really wanted to get to for this. And I got through that a little bit quicker than I expected. That's great. So a couple resources for you. Copilot.john.com is the website that I showed you that is building, deploying, and is really using this continuous deployment process. And there's examples out there that you can use and adopt to your applications. Aspirify.net is my other news website that will keep you up to date on all the things that are going on with .NET Aspire. There's an RSS feed there that you can subscribe to, and you'll be able to get all the latest articles about .NET Aspire wherever they might be on the internet. You don't have to just watch Reddit and see when things come around. You can find me on Twitch, on YouTube. I live stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays, teaching people all about the stuff with Aspire, with Blazor, with Azure, Visual Studio, all the good things that Microsoft makes. You can find me on X, Blue Sky. I hang out a lot. I am C#Fritz, C#Fritz.com on Blue Sky. And of course, you can find my GitHub, github.com/C#Fritz. I'll take any questions that you might have. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming out. I hope you have a great rest of your Azure Dev Summit.
I don't want you to go away. Said I don't want you to go away now. Said I hate when you just can't stay. So won't you come back my way? Say come back my way. And I hear this song and sing along, 'cause I'm here to stay. But when those days are long and the nights are cold, who's gonna keep you warm? Well, I want you in the daylight and I want you in my moonlight. I just want you by my side. And I want you with that sun rays, and I want you in night stargaze. I just want you by my side. And I don't want you to go away. Said I don't want you to go away now. Said I hate when you just can't stay. So won't you come back my way? Say come back my way. Say come back my way. Island hopping and I ain't stopping till I reach my paradise with my island girl, where the thoughts are pure, waves are mean, and the vibes are nice. Other people, if I play with a smile, and it's so easy to just get away. Escape for now, we're gonna leave this town, country bound, where our beauty surrounds. I. 'Cause I don't want you to go away. Said I don't want you to go away now. Said I hate when you just can't stay. So won't you come back my way? Say come back my way. Say come back my way. I said now come back my way. I said now come back my way. I said now come back my way. is another day. As the clock keep ticking away, time is so precious, and so I say, tomorrow is another day. As the clock keep ticking away, time is so precious, and so I say, wake up to meet the rising sun. Get on your feet, don't be no slow. Rolling stone, gather no mass. You move too slow, you will pay the cost. Hear me when I say, cause tomorrow is another day. As the clock keep ticking away, time is so precious, and so I say, tomorrow is another day. As the clock keep ticking away, time is so precious, and so I say, let's make it while the sun is shining. Get up, let's do something creative. Don't waste your time away, or you won't see that day. Tomorrow is another day. As the clock keep ticking away, time is so precious, and so I say, tomorrow is another day. As the clock keep ticking away, time is so precious, and so I say, wake up to meet the rising sun. Get on your feet, don't be no slum. Rolling stone, gather no moss. You move too slow, you'll pay the cost. Tomorrow is another day. As the clock keep ticking away, time is so precious, and so I say, tomorrow is another day. As the clock keep ticking away, time is so precious, and so I say, let's make it while the sun is shining. Wake up and do something creative. Time wait on no one. You got to be strong. Oh, hear me when I say, yeah. Hear me when I say,